Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the disability community.
Thanks for having me, Laszlo. My name's Morwenna, and I'm a consultant that works mostly around arts and culture and screen. And I'm a specialist in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've been working in and around disability for a long time because it's part of my own lived experience as well. Disability's been part of my life for about 20 years now. I'm someone who lives with hidden disability, with MS, where I've got various different access requirements at different times. And I think it's the best club I've ever joined. There are so many awesome people in the disability community, particularly in the arts and disability community, that I love getting to live and breathe this work every day. And it's super fun.
Yeah, cool. So tell me a little bit about your work in disability, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I know it's a long one, but what
Yeah, I
what's
know.
what's
What does
that
that mean?
what's that all about?
Yeah. So what I do most of the time is I am essentially a bit of a critical friend that goes into organizations and helps them work on things to do around those topics, around diversity and inclusion. So that might look like designing a diversity plan for them. It might be doing a policy around workplace adjustment, or it might be helping them figure out their programming strategy around how to program more awesome disabled artists in their festival or at their venue. So most of my work is directly inside and with organisations. But what I get the pleasure to do a lot of the time is also matchmake organisations and introduce them to awesome disabled artists from my community as well. So I also do a lot of training, a lot of disability inclusion training in organisations as well. And I think that's a really important part of kind of making sure that staff in all of these organisations have a good understanding of the social model of disability and how that they can think about accessibility in all different aspects of their work.
Yeah, you talk about accessibility, so like how do you make things accessible for people with disabilities? Like what are some of the things that you do in the accessibility front to make that happen?
So I suppose I'm someone who always thinks about accessibility starting, right at the beginning of a process. And often with arts organisations, that's about starting online. So whether it's a festival or a venue, making sure that you've got an accessible website. And that your social media is accessible as well, and that you actually tell people about the accessibility that's happening at your festival or your event. So I think the online component is really big, and obviously in COVID, there's been some silver linings around having access to a lot more arts material online than we've ever had before, which can be really good for some people with access requirements. Obviously, it doesn't work well for everyone. And then I do a lot, obviously, around the physical side of things too. So that might be looking at the accessibility of a building through an audit kind of process. It might be sitting down with a festival programming team and going, okay, which works are we going to make sure that we've got sign language for, captioning, audio description, which performances are we going to make sure that we do in a relaxed environment. So a lot of it is kind of just doing that forward planning to kind of build accessibility in so that everyone can then participate in your festival or your event.
Hmm. You also do work as an educator. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love talking. I love working with people, and particularly with our sort of next generation of arts leaders coming through. So I do a lot of guest lecturing, and a lot of training, as I mentioned before. So at the moment, I'm doing a bunch of work with the National Institute of Dramatic Arts here in Australia, which is training all of our aspiring actors, writers, directors. And, I usually come in and spend some time with them talking about accessibility to make sure that our future directors, writers, actors have an understanding of how they might want to think about building accessibility into their process. And a lot of the time it's just about some of those really simple practices, like asking whether anyone has any access requirements before going into a rehearsal process. It might be, if you're a writer wanting to write in a disabled character, making sure that you do that with someone with lived experience, or doing that, very much in consultation with someone else, getting feedback on that. So I suppose, I love kind of working with those emerging arts leaders, and then also in organizations, running training, whether that's for front of house staff who might be the sort of customer service facing people who'll be kind of greeting people at an event or festival. It might be training security guards. It might be training management teams to make sure that they can embed that thinking of accessibility into all of their work. So there's so many different conversations that we can have about this topic. And I think education's a really important part of seeing us do better to become an accessible arts sector.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, how can raising awareness of DEIA motivate people, companies, and others to make change in their communities?
I think here in Australia, the conversation around DEIA is absolutely on the rise, and something I wish we talked about more is the business case behind this, because there is an economic argument for being accessible, because you can sell more tickets, you can have more bums on your seats, or whatever it might be. So I think there is a real advantage to committing to do this work, because it opens you up to a really wide audience. It also opens you up to being able to work with really exciting artists with different types of lived experience. And it also opens you up to being able to have a really diverse and exciting workforce as well. Here in Australia at the moment, we're seeing a lot of skills shortages. A lot of organisations are kind of losing staff are moving on quickly to go and work in other places. So I think we really need to kind of focus on some of those internal recruitment practices to make sure that we're opening ourselves up to working with staff with different types of lived experience in an inclusive way as well. So there's lots of reasons, I think, why this work is important, and it's exciting to see more organisations getting on board with it and wanting to do it better and better.
Yeah, that's cool.